Really looking forward to our main event coming up this weekend. And hey, it's been an incredible card. So if you missed the rest of the videos in the playlist, make sure you check them out and help out the buys with a like and a sub. Hey, I hate to say it, but I have to because this group is growing like wildfire. Wow. And we're on track to 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It would mean a lot to us if we could get there. So help us out. Please and thanks. Now let's get into this video, Matt, because Thiago Santos coming off his split decision loss in his title fight against Jon Jones. And hey, if you thought Dominic Reyes got close, this was the original I'm going to get close to Jon Jones fighter. And Thiago Santos, who was having success with 2 bad knees in that fight. And that's one thing that you definitely have to worry about going into this one. The fact that Thiago Santos has surgically repaired knees, and he's been off for quite some time. Now, he is taking on a 41-year-old Glover Teixeira. And if we're talking about former common opponents, for Thiago Santos, he finishes Anthony Smith. For Glover Teixeira, he also finished Anthony Smith in his last fight in impressive fashion where Anthony Smith's corner, get out of there. I mean, that did not go well for those guys. But for Glover Teixeira, I mean, a vintage Glover type of performance in that one. He's on a tidy little win streak. His last loss was in his 5th to last fight against Beastin 25-8, Bellator's own Corey Anderson, who's got a fight this week against Melvin Manhoff. And I mean, you could be in the future and know how that fight ends. But hey, for Glover Teixeira, what's he good at, man? I mean, his boxing's crisp.
Absurd.
His ground game, one of the best in this light heavyweight division.
And I would compare Glover's ground game very much to a Luke Rockhold, where the second he gets on top of you, he must feel like 1,000 pounds. Because once he does get on top of his opponents, it's not as much that his wrestling's going to wow you, like he's a Daniel Cormier who can go from like, you know, a topside throw into an ankle pick. It's not that. His wrestling's quite simple. But once he does establish the top position, it's not Khabib-esque in the way that he gets his positions. But the second he's on top in the ground and pound that he's able to get from just weird angles too. I mean, the Anthony Smith fight is a really important fight to bring up for positives and negatives for Glover. We'll get into that in a sec. But Glover, once he did find his rhythm and once he was able to start to get his hands on Anthony a little bit at the boxing range, you saw once he was able to get the fight to the ground, Anthony Smith is a phenomenal grappler. He's a very credentialed black belt. Glover Teixeira, when he got into full mount, he was able to take his back, basically just transition from back mount to full mount and beat the brakes off Anthony Smith for 2 straight 10-8 rounds. And I do think that that's really important because Glover, you look at 41, you look at the age, you maybe think about some of the bad losses that he's had. His cardio is phenomenal. I don't know what the deal is with 40-year-olds being in great shape in the UFC all of a sudden, but it's no longer 2003. People can fight a lot later into their primes. Thiago Santos does a lot of things that Glover struggles with, and it's vice versa too. Craig and I were talking about this before we started filming, where you look at what Glover does well. It's that top pressure. He's got really good hands. He doesn't throw kicks, though. Well, what does Thiago Santos do? He can throw any kick.
Ask Jack Marshman.
Yeah, ask Jack Marshman. Ask really anyone he's fought. Really imposing guy, even though he used to fight at 185. His wrestling is the thing that worries me. And not only because his wrestling defense isn't, you know, top tier. Now, he was able to defend a lot of the takedown attempts from Jon Jones. But if you go back and watch that fight, it's not like Jon Jones was trying to take him down for the sake of taking him down. He wasn't shooting power doubles, get deep in on them and seeing what he could do. That was very much a string contest on the outside. But Thiago Santos on 2 ACLs was still, or with 2 torn ACLs, was still able to go 25 minutes with Jon Jones. Kristaps Porzingis had 1 torn ACL, and he missed 20 months. So the fact that Thiago's coming back this soon does really worry me. Another basketball guy like Klay Thompson missed a whole year because of 1 ACL. And you're dealing with a guy who not only had that injury in one leg, he had it in both legs. And now he's just decided, hey, this is probably a great time to get into a title eliminator.
From personal experience in a totally different sport, I partially torn the majority of the ligaments in one of my knees. And I can tell you
Craig is Derrick Rose.
But just from experience, I can tell you that road to recovery is not easy. It really isn't. And I didn't have to have any surgery to repair them. It was a good 3 or 4 months before I could actually, you know, move my knee around. I'm 26 and fairly active. So just from that alone, I can tell you, yeah, sure I am. Fairly active in breaking down MMA fights. But apart from that, I can tell you just from my own experience, that was a really bad injury. I've broken my arm before, broken both bones in my forearm playing hockey.
I drank milk growing up.
Just to parlay that into a knee injury, that knee injury was substantially worse for me than it was breaking my arm at my wrist to boot. So to really put that into perspective, for Thiago Santos to come back from 2 major knee surgeries and even to push through the pain to fight in that fight, it's amazing to see that he's at this point. Now, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, personal experience aside. it really sucks that the UFC made the fight between Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off right now. No, it's not. I'm super excited for that fight because this is what's going to happen. Adesanya probably beats Blachowicz, spoiler alert, and then he fights John Jones.
That's probably what the promotion wants.
Well,
yeah,
I'm not sad about that. Listen, you want to give both guys their due, and Thiago Santos, you will not find a bigger fan of that man than your boy over here. I witnessed him wheel kick a person live, and that might be the coolest thing you can do in front of me. But Glover Teixeira is this weird kind of... I think Thiago Santos should beat Glover Teixeira. I think both guys on their best day, Thiago Santos is the better out of the two. I think he's the younger, he's the more explosive guy. And when we do see Glover fight these dynamic strikers, at least as of late, people forget, he beat Karl Roberson. Karl Roberson also elbowed him in the head 97 times.
Glory kickboxing's Karl Roberson.
Exactly. He was able to hurt Glover on the feet. You look at Cutelaba. He spinning back-fisted Glover and really had him hurt in that fight. But again, it's always Glover. It's withstand the punishment, kind of download my opponent's game plan, and then start to unload on them. I just don't know if really anyone can stand back and download the game plan of Thiago Santos before he can start teeing off on them. Because we see two versions of Thiago Santos. We see the version that fought Jimmy Manuel, who is just, okay, I'm going to throw punches, you're going to throw punches, we're going to have one of those wild kind of slobber knocker fights. And if you do get into a who has more firepower fight with Thiago Santos, you're not going to beat him because not only does he have the power in his hands, he has the power in his kicks too, and he's so dynamic with the two and switching it up. Glover is going to need to get this fight in boxing range immediately. I'll let you get to the votes here in a second. I do think the boxing of Glover is really important because if he stands at that kicking range with Thiago Santos, double ACL reconstruction or not, you don't throw kicks at all. I don't care how limited he might be in his movement, what version of Thiago Santos is. He's a better kicker than Glover Teixeira. And I do think if he is able to keep this fight at range early on, really batter that leg of Glover, I would go after the head less of Teixeira early than I would later on. I would really try to soften up the midsection, soften up those legs, and slow him down so that when he decides to kind of start to make his push, it's a lot more easy to deal with.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what kind of Thiago Santos we get. Because, I mean, if you go back to Dustin Poirier, he has a fight against Khabib, he comes out, he fights Dan Hooker. Did we see him throw a ton of kicks after having hip surgery? It wasn't as many.
He went to the body a lot.
He did, but it wasn't as many as we were used to seeing. We've seen a lot of fighters where they move on in their careers. They have different knee injuries, leg injuries. They come back, and you don't see a kick-heavy offense. So will Thiago Santos' game plan totally change up? Let's see what happens. But if we have a look at the votes, Matt, and we're normally going with Tapology votes, but hey, spoiler alert, with question mark kicks, we always go over our votes over at Fight Night Picks on Instagram. I can't stress it enough. So we put it out there at Fight Night Picks on Instagram. And you had 77% of the vote going with Thiago Santos to get the win here, 23% with Glover Teixeira. That was good for 227 votes for Santos to 69 for Glover Teixeira. And if we bring in the odds, Matt, Glover Teixeira right now, the underdog, open to plus 185. The money dropped on Teixeira quickly. It's come back up for Santos, and Teixeira at a plus 187. Again, that on best fight odds. For Santos, open minus 221. He's now at a minus 233. So all signs pointing towards a Thiago Santos win. It's been a while since we've seen him in the octagon. To be specific, about a year and 3 months for Teixeira the last time out. That fight against Anthony Smith about 5 months ago. So he has fought in 2020, and he's on a 4-fight win streak. This is such a good fight, and it's a tough one to predict. And again, as far as motivations are concerned, you're lining up for a title contender spot. I would think the winner, maybe if you go out there in impressive fashion, get the win, you face the Adesanya Blachowicz winner. But again, if Adesanya wins that fight, you have to think it sets up a John Jones fight. So it gets a little murky there. I love this fight. I think it's a great matchup. Again, if you want to point to two marquee wins and losses for Thiago Santos, well, he's beaten Jan Blachowicz before, and he hasn't just beaten him, he's finished him. And for Glover Teixeira, I look at those 4 fights, and again, we're talking, he finishes Karl Roberson. All right, well, Roberson's a middleweight, but a great striker. He beats Cutelaba. He beats Krylov by split decision, and then he finishes, again, a former title challenger and a common opponent between these guys in Anthony Smith. That was such a statement win only 5 months ago. It's tough not to roll with Teixeira, at least give him, a bit of a look anyway.
It's true, and maybe I am putting too much stock into that win over Anthony Smith, and nothing against Anthony Smith, but it was Glover taking a lot of shots, being able to get over that hurdle, and then dominating someone else. So if you take their names out of it and just look at the fight for what it is, can he get past a similar storm if Thiago Santos was in that position? Probably not, but his success that he found against Anthony Smith, he'd be able to what he was able to do to Smith on the ground is not even comparable to what he'd be able to do to Santos on the ground. Because Anthony Smith defensively off his back is quite good. He can get back up to his feet. Santos doesn't have that ground game in his back pocket to really rely on. So Santos, he's kind of a more volatile version of Anthony Smith, where the things he does well, it's like, oh my God, like we have to avoid all of these. But there are significant holes in his game. It's just he's got that great equalizer, which is the power. Everything in my body says Glover Teixeira. It really does. Everyone probably figured it out by now. I love basketball, and ACLs terrify me. When guys get hurt, they sometimes come back and they're never the same. It's a little bit different. It's kind of like Tommy John now in baseball, where like it used to be a death sentence for your career, but now you just miss time and you come back and there's not really a drop-off. If anything, it's beneficial. With ACLs, you either get worse or you stay the same. There's nothing else. So best case scenario, we see a Thiago Santos at 36 with 2 ACL surgeries, with a year layoff. Like, there's a lot of question marks starting to get in my head about Thiago Santos. I'm going to pick Glover. It's an underdog pick. I'll probably put some money on it. But this is such a hard fight to predict just because it is. It's either one guy's going to knock out the other in probably the most violent fashion we've seen since that Buckley Kasanganai knockout, or Glover's just going to go out there and kind of be the tide. You know, there's nothing you can do to avoid it. It's going to come in eventually. He's going to take his lumps. He's going to eat some shots, but I do think Glover's going to be able to get the win. It might not be the most exciting thing for the division. I can't say I'm overly thrilled that we might be seeing an Israel Adesanya Glover Teixeira fight in the future. Who would have thought that would ever happen? But I'm going to say Glover gets it done by TKO ground and pound. I really think he's going to be able to do it. Hashtag one more run. I know Alistair Overeem's been using that, but Glover, get on board.
I mean, Glover Teixeira, the last time he fought for the title was in 2014. That's insane. When he fought John Jones, and it definitely didn't go his way in that one. Of course, we're talking about one of the greatest of all time. Now, the thing, Matt, that really is telling for me is the stats in terms of takedown accuracy and defense. Again, for Thiago Santos, 68% takedown defense. That's not bad. It really isn't. But Glover Teixeira will shoot, and shoot again if he needs to. Now, that can come to his detriment. We've seen that. I mean, you can go back and look at some of those losses. Corey Anderson, really good wrestler. It didn't work for Glover Teixeira in that fight. The fight against Alexandr Gustafsson, one of the best combinations I've ever seen in my entire life for Gustafsson to get the win. A guy that could never really get over the hump. Again, in terms of striking metrics, they're better for Santos. Some of the grappling metrics, better for Santos. He doesn't shoot for as many takedowns. He doesn't get as many takedowns. I'm going to go with old man consistency. Wow. And it's weird. And this is a fight that you said you might go for it. I'm leaving this one off on my card. Again, it's an old Molson Canadian pop and popcorn type of fight for me. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it's worth. But for me, I don't mind the older guy that's been more active and the guy that I know what I can get out of Glover Teixeira. I've seen it time and again. Against Nikita Krylov, you might not like some of the early fights that Krylov had coming back to the UFC, but in a fight like that, you beat him by split decision. All right, Nikita.
It wasn't a split decision, let's be honest. Glover won every round of that fight and he dominated it. It's a split decision, but only if you look at his record.
To beat Nikita Krylov, who is that good on the ground, now he does get beat by submission a lot, but he submits a lot of guys. To beat a guy like that and then have a bit of a run of dominance against... Again, you might be down on Ion Kutsalaba after the fight against Magomed Ankalaev, the second one that was booked 4 times. You might be down on Glover Teixeira because he beat Carl Roberson or Anthony Smith, who's on a bit of a downturn. But again, the ground game of Glover Teixeira, you can't sleep on it. I am going to almost reluctantly go with Glover Teixeira unless something wild happens this week because, again, we get the chance to use some hindsight on Saturday with Fight Night Picks *Kick. So
I will be here.
Matt's going to be here. Make sure you check that one out because Matt's going to be sticking around a lot more in the coming future. And this is a really interesting fight. So we're both going with Glover Teixeira to get the win in the main event. I'm just looking forward to this fight. We got a great card coming up, so make sure if you're checking out the individual videos, you check out the rest of the playlist. If you hung on for the entirety of this in the one-time shot, congrats to you, and maybe check out the Fight Night Picks merch station down below. But we're really looking forward to this card. Both of us going with Teixeira. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.